If you have an interest in FPS games, you probably know that the choice of the game engine and how well the aiming and movement flow into each other can make or break a game. Some people might feel right at home with Counter-Strike's intricate gunplay, others might prefer the ability to crouch spam in Overwatch and deal that way. The movement in Overwatch also feels a bit floaty to me, since you don't have to build up velocity to reach maximum speed while strafing. To give another example, closer to the game I'm gonna talk about today, Call of Duty has this almost addictive design, with fluid animations, low recoil and quick movement. It's very beginner friendly, and even without the best aim, you can often go on kill streaks and be an important factor for a team. These are points that I will mention fairly often in this video, especially the movement and aiming part. Movement is in my opinion the reason why Titanfall 2 has received such high praise, because it focuses and integrates this aspect into every corner of its gameplay. It's a game that flew under my radar even though I read comments fairly often on various websites describing Titanfall 2 as a masterpiece and one of the best FPS campaigns ever, followed by people begging for Titanfall 3 of course. For one reason or another, I held off on playing it, even though it sounded like something I would enjoy. I finally bought it after the Origin games came to Steam, and now that I think about it, this might actually explain why I didn't buy it in the first place, because I'm just really not a fan of Origin and how sluggish it feels. Anyway, here I am after putting in about 6 to 8 hours into the single player campaign and 10 more hours into the multiplayer, telling you that I have now become one of those people that really want Titanfall 3. It's an insanely fun game with excellent combat, and although the story is great, it definitely has a few flaws that I will talk about in this review. First, what is Titanfall? It's a FPS game developed by Respawn Entertainment, and if you have no idea who they are, here's a short history lesson. Jason West and Vince Zampella were the leads at Infinity Ward when it was founded back in 2002. Infinity Ward is the company behind Call of Duty Modern Warfare 1 and Modern Warfare 2. Both great games that I enjoyed a lot on release, and I don't think I'm the only one. Activision gave them control over the COD series in exchange for them making Modern Warfare 2, but Activision didn't like the trade, so they went ahead and tried to trigger the clause which would revert the control back to Activision if they were both fired. The matter has since been settled, and West and Zampella went ahead and created Respawn Entertainment under the EA banner, releasing the Titanfall series, among other games. Now, why did I spend so much time telling you all this? If you're someone like me who grew up with Modern Warfare 2 montages on Machinima, you definitely know the quality of games these guys are able to put out, and you can truly feel this when playing Titanfall 2. I am by no means saying that Modern Warfare 1 or 2 were perfect games, but they were enjoyable experiences with very addicting multiplayer modes. While playing Titanfall 2, I felt a lot of the same addicting variables during the game, with the smooth combat and movement only heightening the experience. It gave me the same rush as both Modern Warfare games, leaving me wanting more. These guys have experience and know how to make fast-paced FPS games, although I'm not sure if they know how shotguns work. Titanfall 2 switches up the formula a bit, introducing a completely new universe with, you guessed it, Titans. No, not those Titans, these Titans. Although that would also be pretty cool. With the zipline you can also imitate the 3DM gear, at points at least, so maybe we're not that far off. But for now, it's bye bye Attack Titan and hello Ronin. Also, while we're on this topic, watch and read Attack on Titan, it's a great series. If I had to describe Titanfall 2 in one sentence, I would put it like this. A mixture of Modern Warfare 2, with more movement options than Apex Legends, the feeling of war of Battlefield 3, and the time to kill that is shorter than... Okay, I'm sorry, I'm gonna stop with the AOT references now. I've just been watching a lot of the show recently. Let's talk about the gameplay first. The gunplay is extremely smooth, both as a pilot and a Titan. As a pilot, you have a whole arsenal of weapons at your disposal, ranging from LMGs and assault rifles to SMGs and snipers. There are also different types of grenades you can use, my personal favorite being the Arc Nade. And you also get bonus abilities that characters in Apex Legends are based off that you can use in-game.
Watch out or I'll grapple you, literally.
In multiplayer, you can choose between a variety of options. In single player, you are stuck with the invisibility cloak from Harry Potter, which is still pretty cool. Additionally, you will unlock different weapon setups for a Titan as the story progresses, with each setup completely changing your playstyle. For example, you start with a classic assault rifle setup with a shield that reflects projectiles back onto your enemies. Later on, you unlock a melee mod, which allows you to slice up enemies up close and gives you more mobility options. Every Titan class feels fun, viable, and I'm sure everyone will find a playstyle that suits them. There are 6 Titan classes, each one with a distinctive name, instantly delivering information to you about how to approach the fight. This means that in single and in multiplayer, you will be able to recognize which Titan type you are about to engage, and are able to plan around their playstyle. Which is awesome, and adds a lot more tactics to the Titan fights. To give you a simple example, Ronin uses a sword and a shotgun. If you see a Ronin, you will try to fight in open space and create distance before engaging in the fight. And this is just a simple example that every beginner can grasp. Later on, you also have these different Titan shields that every Titan class can use, and you also have to adapt to that and think about the cooldowns and when to engage, when maybe you can win a 2v1, maybe lose a 1v1. All these aspects come into play, and they're really fun in single and in multiplayer. Speaking of Titans, calling for Titanfall and taking control of your Titan feels absolutely epic. But the aspect that stands out the most for me is the movement. As mentioned before, the movement in this game is outstanding. Every single movement flows into the next one. You are able to double jump, wall run, slide, and combo all of these movements into each other. Since the TTK is so short, I think movement is of more importance than aiming in Titanfall 2. But you still need to be decent at aiming if you want to master being a pilot. Going into the discussion about the campaign, the movement and the importance is already introduced in the first mission of the game. You play as Jack Cooper, a rifleman aspiring to become a pilot. Before you start playing, you are shown an incredible cinematic explaining the state of the world from Cooper's perspective, as well as the ongoing war and what pilots and Titans are. Honestly, from the moment I watched this cinematic, I was absolutely hooked.
Of all the things I've seen on the battlefields of the frontier, the pilot is the true dominant force.
If I could, I would show the whole cinematic right here, but I highly urge you to watch it in full on YouTube if you want to get a feel for the game and if you're unsure if you'll like it. The music, the dialogue, the action, all perfectly encapsulate Titanfall and give you a fantastic introduction, pumping you up for the game you're about to experience. I still get goosebumps even after watching it like 3 times already, but I have to admit that I am a sucker for cinematics like this. The first mission introduces you to all the basics while giving you a bit more context on the story. If you're familiar with FPS games, especially if you have played Apex Legends, you will feel right at home and quickly grasp all the tools available to you. There's one important point I have to mention here. You can see that Respawn understands FPS gamers. If you go into settings, you can set every hotkey in an instant, you can swap your sensitivity easily and be done with your setup in a few minutes. There's no annoying sliders or endlessly confusing UI, you can just enter the number like it was designed by a human being that actually playtested the game. There are no absurd sensitivity settings that tell you absolutely nothing, for example a slider with no numbers there, or sensitivity settings that are set to 0.000001 dpi players as standard. Instead, the numbers are based on CSGO's source engine sensitivity settings. So if you've played any Counter-Strike game, you can get a feel for what sensitivity 1 means and go from there and adapt it to the game. And yes, with this critique, I'm looking at games like Rainbow Six Siege and others with their annoying ass aim settings that have no decimal points or even require you to go into the text files to find the correct sensitivity that you want. Just wanted to mention that here in short. But let's get back to the campaign and the story. During the introductory mission, there is also a test run section, a parkour of sorts that you can try as often as you want to see if you can beat the times of the best pilots. I won't lie, this was already so much fun that I think I spent at least 1 hour running this course to get better, because I enjoyed myself with all the possible war runs and gun options so much. My advice, try to run it with the EVA 8. After you're done trying to compulsively get first place, your captain wants to show you a Titan simulation, which is abruptly cut short.
Go ahead, rifleman. Call on your first Titan. Look up to the sky. There he is. All right, decompress.
This instantly intrigued me since I thought there is some error with Jack's Neuralink. And right after this, you are thrown into your first combat mission, and oh boy, from this point onward, the game just keeps on giving.
Hang of it someday. We'll make a pilot out of you yet, rifleman. But not today. No time.
Lastimosa.
Anderson,
You son of a bitch. See you down there.
You son of a bitch! I'm in!
Every single new part of the game feels fresh and leads you to different environments, ranging from jungles to conveyor belt systems. All this is helped by the superb graphics. The game is well optimized, so you should be able to reach even 144 FPS comfortably, depending on your setup and the choice of graphics settings of course. At one point in the game, you reach an old research facility, which has been affected by time distortions. During this part of the game, you gain the ability to travel between the past and the present. This is pulled off in a superb manner, with time jumps being integrated into combat and puzzle sections flawlessly. Just look how cool this is. I think this is what people mean when they talk about Titanfall 2 being one of the best FPS campaigns out there. Even though the game isn't very long, every mission feels handcrafted, varied, and brings an innovation to keep the player entertained. There is no repetition in the sense that every mission is just run from cover to cover, kill a few endless waves of enemies, and then go on with the story. Every mission that you go on feels like its own instance that is just so original and so different from the ones that you've played before. It's just a joy to play. The story itself is alright. You quickly get a feel for the two sides fighting each other and your goals, with every finished mission pushing the plot forward, albeit sometimes a bit too quickly. This was one of my gripes of the campaign. You learn something new, talk about the next steps, and are suddenly thrown into the next mission, which feels like it just jumped 20 years forward in time, leaving you confused for a bit. I unfortunately can't say if my confusion stemmed from me not having played the first title of the series, or if I'm right with my critique that the game spends too little time with the factions and world building. Because even though I'm not much of a sci-fi guy, The Apex Fall universe got me hooked with its lore and storytelling, which I wish there was more of. In some games I ignore audio logs completely, sometimes because there's an abundance of them, or sometimes because they talk about stuff that is completely unrelated to the story, or at least the point at which you find yourself at. In Titanfall 2, I tried to listen to every single one. There is one moment I distinctly remember in the time facility mission that I mentioned before, and there was this audio log that explained a lot about the plot, and I just stood there and listened to it for 5 minutes because I wanted to learn more about how the people lived there and what happened to the place.
I would like to spend some time today to talk about the value of human life. There is no value to human life. Now that I have your attention, to be more precise, human life to a certain limit is expendable.
The whole time distortion facility part in general is awesome. Continuing with the campaign, there are 2 more points that stand out. First, the bond with your Titan, BT. In general, it's really well done. You feel like you're a team. You have some superb bonding moments, ranging from situations where you protect each other and work together, to the simple but effective dialogue system, which brings a lot of humor with it.
Pilot, I advise against turning yourself over to the IMC. Voice pattern analysis indicates they are lying.
Don't worry, BT. I'm not going anywhere.
Understood, but I do recommend you move. IMC salvage teams are not far away.
I mean, I'm not leaving you.
It is a common requirement for pilots to maneuver in situations without a linked Titan.
And all of this is plotted nicely into story-centric events. The dialogue mechanic is a nice addition, but it makes the moments stand out where Jack doesn't react with a voice line at all, which unfortunately pulls you out of the immersion completely. As mentioned before, there are emotional bonding moments, but because of the brevity of the game, those fall short a little bit. I would have liked a few more relaxed moments with BT, just talking to him, more of the dialogue system maybe. But this also leads me into the second point that I wanted to make, which is the length of the campaign. I said at the start that it took me between 6 to 8 hours to finish it on the master difficulty, and overall, it's an enjoyable ride that leaves you only wanting more. It's a journey that ends a little bit too quickly, with an epilogue that screams Titanfall 3. The ending feels a bit abrupt, with plot threads intentionally left open, I assume, but in general the conclusion rounded out the game nicely. I just really wish there was more of it. Since I bought the game on sale for €10, I can't complain at all, honestly. I definitely got my money's worth, and I will be replaying the story in the future. Even without taking my time in the multiplayer into account, that price point is more than fair. Just a short sidebar about the difficulty. If you have experience with FPS games, definitely try the master difficulty. The AI unfortunately isn't something that stands out a lot, and with your whole arsenal of combat options, this difficulty at least forces you to play around tactically a bit and combine the movement with sometimes going to cover, and might give you a bit of a challenge if you're someone like me who enjoys that. I instantly wanted to play Titanfall 1 after finishing the story, only to realize that the Steam version has had its single player campaign removed, and the online portion of the game is unplayable due to hackers flooding the servers, disallowing anyone to connect to the game. Until EA fixes this, you should probably stay away from the Steam version of Titanfall 1, and even when it's fixed, I would have probably only played it for the single player content, which is gone anyway, so that's a bit of a bummer. Don't quote me on this, but as far as I understand it, Titanfall 1 shipped without a single player campaign, and some missions were only added later on when they noticed that the sales weren't as high as they would have liked them to be. And I think there was a lot of talk about the missing single player campaign, which a lot of players want. Some people just buy the FPS games because they want to play the campaign. So I assume that's something they wanted to fix in Titanfall 2, and in my opinion, they succeeded. Now, I wanted to focus on single player with this review, but I have to talk about the multiplayer. I mean, it's still active, you can still play it, so why not mention it, why not talk about it? Since the player base isn't very large, I was unable to try all the game modes and mostly stuck to attrition. Basically team deathmatch. The mode is 6v6, first team to reach the point limit wins, but there are some changes to the classic formula. The game features a grunt system, which means there are AI soldiers fighting each other on both sides, which you can eliminate to gain points for your team. One of the reasons for this system might be that the maps needed to be large enough to allow for a lot of movement options, but simultaneously, if they are too large, you run into the problem of endlessly searching for enemies. With the grunt system, you are permanently able to fight, and the battlefield feels more like a war zone than just a small arena. Also, opposed to some Call of Duty maps, you don't constantly die to someone else and get third-partied after you duel someone, because there's just more downtime. It's a combination of the smaller player number per team, the larger maps, and again the fact that even if you're running around, you don't feel bored, because you can still help your team by eliminating the grunts. If you're someone like me, who doesn't really like the kill streaks in Call of Duty, you might like the Titanfall that you can do in Titanfall, because if you earn enough points, you are able to call for Titanfall and take control of your Titan. The gameplay here is what you know and love from the campaign, and in my short time playing, I felt that even in multiplayer, the Titan to Titan and the Titan to pilot combat is balanced. You feel like you can fight a Titan as a pilot, but one mistake and you are done. Movement is key here on both sides, with aiming and the correct loadout being additional aspects to consider. As a Titan you feel strong, but can't mindlessly charge in alone. Since I mentioned loadouts, you can customize your pilot and Titan to your heart's content, without the UI being cluttered and confusing like in some modern games. You also have the classic progression of unlocking additional equipment and attachments as you level up, which I always enjoyed, but I understand if some people find this annoying. The pilot to pilot gameplay unfortunately has a few parts that stand out negatively. There are extremely annoying weapons implemented that remind me of the mistakes that Modern Warfare 2 committed, like the akimbo shotguns that could snipe people on the other side of the map. In Titanfall 2, you have equipment like the smart pistol, which automatically locks onto enemies and one-taps them. It honestly baffles me how any FPS game designer can think to themselves that this would be a good implementation into a multiplayer shooter. Did they think this was cool? Did they think that every weapon in the campaign has to be included in the multiplayer? It's just baffling. And the fact that this weapon is still in the game shows a bit of the disconnect and maybe the abandonment of Titanfall 2. It's just very, very difficult to understand balancing decisions of modern game designers sometimes, especially in the multiplayer portions. But that's not just a problem in these two games, unfortunately. I initially had a short discussion about the weapon balance at this point, but I honestly haven't played enough of the game to be able to judge that accurately. So here's my completely subjective and biased take. When I first started playing with the standard assault rifle setup, the R201, I thought, damn, this feels really good. There is some recoil, and even though the time to kill is short, you really need to stabilize your aim to eliminate someone before you lose sight of them. But once you play more, you realize that the long range scopes on ARs feel a bit useless, since the recoil becomes way too strong at certain distances, and you will mostly fight in short to medium range anyway. This means that shotguns and SMGs feel stronger in most cases. If you play on an open map, on the other hand, most people will opt for a sniper anyway, or something that can close the gap quickly, since you have so many options of how you want to do that. At a beginner level, I felt like I could play any weapon if I adjust my playstyle accordingly, but this could be completely different at higher levels. I have no idea how it looks there. If you play the game casual like me, just jumping in for an hour and playing 3 to 4 rounds, you will definitely have enough content here to enjoy yourself. The only fun breakers are what I already mentioned before, like the EPG, Smart Pistol, and in some cases also the Mastiff. There's also something very nostalgic about being 360 no-scoped in Titanfall 2 multiplayer by Kraber only players. It reminds you of the good old days, you know? The community is small and for the most part friendly. This might also be why I didn't encounter too many Smart Pistol players during my short stroll through the Titanfall 2 multiplayer. To conclude, it's enjoyable, but can get a bit tiring after a few hours, especially if you are matched with players who have a lot of experience. You will get absolutely crushed, and it can lower the fun factor by a lot, because they'll just be running circles around you. It's also faster paced than Call of Duty and Apex Legends because of the movement options, which requires some getting used to. But the rounds are fairly short, so even if you have a bad game, you can just queue up again and enjoy yourself. Titanfall 2 is currently on sale on Steam for €10, I think. And if you enjoy FPS games, and even if you don't care about the multiplayer, you should definitely get it for the fun campaign. For €40, I unfortunately can't recommend it, because the full price there's just no telling how long the service will be kept alive, and although the campaign is fantastic, it is definitely too short to warrant the price point on its own. It's a great game, and there's a reason why so many people are asking for a sequel. Trust me. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.